On an ordinary morning, this man's life seemed to be in perfect order. However, everything changed dramatically when his wife came home from work in a state of despair. Without explanation, she quickly packed her bags and disappeared, leaving behind a house that was once full of laughter and joy, now shrouded in an unsettling silence. His questions, as well as those of his daughters, remained unanswered, while his mind was lost in a maze of thoughts, trying to find any clue to explain the sudden abandonment. Weeks passed, and suddenly his wife returned.
My wife has been leaving us for the last 3 days, and I'm completely lost in my current situation, desperately looking for answers. She's 39 and I'm 40. We've been married for 16 years and have 3 daughters. The oldest is 15, the middle one is 13, and the youngest is 11. We've been dating since high school and have been together for about 22 years. The information I have is limited, but here's what I know. 3 days ago, my wife came home from work looking frantic and emotional. Although she had to work the next day, she hurriedly packed a bag and left the house. I only found out about this because our eldest daughter was at home and witnessed the situation. Despite trying to talk to her, my wife cried in anguish and remained silent. The only thing she mentioned was that she was panicking. Despite our attempts to contact her via messages and calls, she didn't respond. I contacted her parents, who assured us that she is safe with them and asked for patience and understanding. I also spoke to her sister, brother, and a close friend from work. The brother said he had no information, while the friend from work mentioned that she was at work in the morning but left at lunchtime. 3 days ago, my wife disappeared. That's all I know. In these 3 days, there has been no contact from her, not even with the children. No one is telling us anything, and here I am, trying to look after my 3 girls without her. The children keep asking me what's going on and what happened to their mother. All I can say is that she's with grandma and grandpa, and that we should be patient and understanding. I have an overwhelming urge to pack up the children quickly and drive there unannounced, but that would be crazy. Who does that? They're only 3 hours away, but staying here in uncertainty is horrible. The kids think we've had a big fight and are getting divorced, but that's far from the truth. We've never fought, and the kids know it. I don't know what's going on. I have a lot of thoughts as I try to navigate all this without her. If someone had died, the spouse's family would be the first to be informed. Perhaps some trauma from the past has resurfaced. However, if it were me, my wife would be the first person I would turn to for support. At the moment, we are left with a void of information. Nothing makes sense. I don't know what to do, and I'm here in limbo with the girls. We're all at a loss for answers, and no one is telling us anything, which leaves me feeling worried, scared, and angry. Pretty much any emotion one can feel in this situation. Can anyone suggest anything reasonable? Why would someone abandon their family like this? Update. My father-in-law didn't call me last night, so eventually I contacted the police for a welfare check. This action unleashed a storm of problems and truths. I discovered that my wife had been having an affair for at least 2 years. Her lover apparently had a heart attack on Tuesday and ended up passing away that night. It seems that my mother-in-law and probably my sister-in-law also knew about the affair and were actively covering it up. I still haven't had any contact from my wife, either with me or with the girls. I'm trying to hide this situation from them for the time being. Honestly, I have no idea what to do from here. That's all I know, and that's enough for now. I'm on the verge of breaking up, both me and our family. I don't know how to move forward with this news, but it's what we have. If you pray, please pray for me and for us. Now that the chips are down, I've been suffering from a lot of anxiety, especially at night, when the chaos of the day is over and the mind takes over. I go through bouts of depression, followed by overwhelming anger, and sometimes both at the same time. Sleep is almost impossible. During the day, I navigate aimlessly in a zombie-like state, trying to find some sense in it all. Initially, I believed that my wife was involved in a 2-year affair, but now it seems that the infidelity may have lasted even longer. The lover she cheated with was someone she had known for a long time. The revelation tragically came to light when he died of a heart attack. I'm still searching for information with the help of my eldest daughter. I didn't plan to keep sharing my situation, but many people have offered helpful advice and I feel I owe it to them. It's almost become therapeutic. It hurts to know that so many other people are also going through this kind of pain, and I feel so sorry for them. Yesterday and today, I met with 2 different lawyers to discuss my options. I've also contacted several places about therapy, but the waiting lists are very long. I'm trying to follow a lot of suggestions that others have given me, such as avoiding alcohol or smoking, even though I've never drunk or smoked before. I'm also focusing on my self-care by exercising regularly. I consider myself to be in good shape for my age, but it's been incredibly challenging to find the energy and motivation to exercise. It really has been a tough road, with daily struggles and frequent questions popping up all the time. Each day brings with it a new explosion of complicated details, and at this point I'm looking for advice and guidance on at least one specific aspect, in the hope of finding some solace and maybe getting some sleep. My wife meant everything to me. She was my best friend since high school, the mother of my 3 beautiful daughters. We have so many memories together, from inside jokes to secret handshakes. And now it's all gone. Simply all gone. I think of all our years together. Every milestone, every laugh, every memory. Now I'm deeply depressed. It's paralyzing. It feels like none of it meant anything to her. And now my future will be without her. And then, of course, the insatiable, raging anger overwhelms me. I scream into the pillow, punch the mattress until my arms are sore. It's a horrible cycle. I only go to sleep out of sheer exhaustion and suddenly wake up, the mind games starting all over again. Any energy I have, I dedicate to my daughters, who have been trying to look after me as if they were the parents. It's unfair to put them in that situation. Could you share your experiences of sleeping after discovering an affair? How did you cope with the deafening silence and emptiness of the night while you were alone with your negative thoughts? For now, the only thing that helps me is to focus on my daughters to get a good sleep and keep that as a top priority. It probably started as something emotional and then became physical. 2 questions hang over me, the answers to which I may never get. Yesterday, my in-laws paid a surprise visit to see their grandchildren. My wife has been staying at their house since this nightmare began, keeping me in the dark and leaving the children to suffer too, which is absurd. Even so, I realized how their visit could help the children, so I allowed them in. They spent 15 minutes greeting the girls and relieving them of some of their attention. Then both in-laws asked to speak to me in private. It was a long conversation, as you can imagine. In short, my wife wants to come home, but she's afraid of my reaction to her actions and how I'll be with her. Instead of answering my questions directly, her parents redirected their efforts to finding out what they thought was most important. They tried to determine whether I planned to divorce and spent a considerable amount of time trying to convince me to forgive my wife and try to rebuild our marriage for the sake of the children. Although they seemed visibly ashamed and embarrassed, it was clear that they wanted my wife to leave their home. The conversation was conducted in a civilized and respectful manner. I must confess that I misled them by stating that I was uncertain about my future plans. I don't intend to reveal my true intention of going through with the divorce anytime soon. It's ridiculous to think that leaving my wife would mean leaving you too. However, I fear that revealing my decision prematurely could damage my chances of extracting the truth from her. I recognize that I may never fully discover the truth. I'm determined to make her sit down in front of me and provide an explanation, looking into my eyes. It's not a movie. It's more than 17 years of marriage, being together since high school, having and raising 3 children, sharing countless memories and everything we've built together. I want her to look me in the eye and tell me everything. I want to feel the weight of her shame. I also want my daughters to know that I gave their mother the chance to explain herself, apologize and sort things out like mature adults. I'm still trying to choose the path that will set the best example for them. Legally, I can't stop my wife from coming home. The lawyer made that clear. If she wants to come home, I can't stop her, although I absolutely don't want her right now. My daughters and I have started to get used to a pleasant routine. I made a demand that I thought would be impossible for a while. I said that my wife could come home if she sat down with me in person, looked me in the eye and revealed everything about her affair. I don't want a simple adjusted confession of guilt or for her to tell me what I want to hear. I want her to answer all my questions from start to finish, without hesitation or deception. When I'm satisfied, she'll have to sit down with the girls and apologize in person. Then she'll answer all their questions. Considering that they're already aware, I think that's fair. Legally, she has the right to return home at any time and is not obliged to comply with any demands. However, if she remains hesitant to face us, perhaps I can use that to my advantage. I want to make it clear that I'm not trying to be tricky or deceitful. I simply wish to avoid living together, if possible, as I'm not ready for that at the moment. There is a mandatory 90-day waiting period in our state before the divorce can be finalized in any way. Her return home is inevitable. We'll both have to go back to work eventually, and life will move on regardless of this mess. I'd just like to prolong this so that I can plan and get into a better mental and emotional state. My wife has been sending text messages to the girls, stating that she doesn't want a divorce and apologizing to them repeatedly. They have shown me the messages and ask about me on a daily basis. The reality of what she did to us is hitting all of us hard, especially in the last few days. How do you think I should manage this? Do you think my demand was foolish or that I could have done something different? Finally, it seems that my wife will be coming home sooner or later, as I understand from one of our daughters. I feel confident in my path ahead now. I'm not shaken by it, as I knew it would happen eventually. I just want to make the best decision for my daughters and then for me as we move forward. This is going to be quite anticlimactic, but I apologize for the length. I just need to get something off my chest. I've had a terrible weekend. My wife came home yesterday, after much anticipation throughout the week. In the past, I would greet her with a hug and a kiss the moment she walked through the door. But this time, an incredibly awkward discomfort hung between us. Although she tried to initiate a hug before saying anything, I walked away as if nothing had happened. The situation seemed surreal. After she had settled down naturally, I asked her to tell me everything. Again, she said she wasn't ready. We'd already spoken on the phone earlier in the week, and it was the same excuse as before. I insisted that the only condition for her to come home was that she loved our family enough to explain why she had been away for more than 3 weeks. But she just repeated that she wasn't ready for that. It was hard to hold in my anger so as not to shout at her. I took a few deep breaths and tried to calm down. However, as I tried, I felt an urge to do things that I can't mention here. It's fair to say that I finally spoke after the first of many long pauses. I simply said that she had been having an affair for over 4 years with a work colleague, and that she planned to leave me for this other man. She simply disappeared from the family's life. And now she's walking through the door without fulfilling the one condition I asked her to: explain herself. I told her I would file for divorce. That's when things got weird. Her body language and facial expression made it clear that she had no idea how much I knew about the case. Her eyes went wide when she saw me. Then she stood in the kitchen, staring at the floor, completely stoic. I expected any reaction but that. I anticipated several possible reactions when my wife returned. I thought of an emotional move, perhaps her playing the victim, or a tearful confession. I was prepared for a heated argument, shouting, or her blaming me for the affair. I was ready for a serious tone, thinking we could sit down and talk. However, what happened was completely different. We stood in the kitchen in absolute silence for about 5 minutes. It was the strangest moment I've ever experienced. None of us knew what to say, and the discomfort was palpable. I even sat in front of the mirror beforehand, preparing myself for all the possible scenarios that this confrontation could present. But I didn't wait for that. I decided right then and there to map out everything I knew about her case. I started to tell her everything, admitting my assumptions about various things, such as how she met her partner in the case, her sister's involvement, what happened during the lockdowns, etc. She just looked at the floor the whole time. I became increasingly irritated as I spoke, because she didn't say or do anything. I tried hard not to raise my voice or use profanity. Finally, I managed to pull myself together, but the awkward silence persisted. Then the anger turned to sadness as I realized everything. So I softly asked her what I did to drive her away, if she ever loved me, and if her partner in the affair was worth it. She said nothing, didn't move, just stood there with her head down. There were no tears, apologies, shouts, or explanations. The pain I felt at that moment was intense, perhaps even worse than the day I found out everything. I didn't know if I would be able to move. Unfortunately, the situation got worse when our daughters overheard the whole conversation. I felt an enormous sense of stupidity as I realized that, despite my efforts to prioritize their needs over the past few weeks, the unintended consequences were now unfolding. I didn't think about their presence as I confronted my wife. Our eldest daughter came down the stairs furious and poured out a lot of pent-up anger. My wife quickly went upstairs and locked the bedroom door. This is where we are now. I heard my wife crying most of last night until she fell asleep. Only our youngest daughter tried to talk to her. The rest of us avoided her. I'm going to suggest that she stay with her sister until we can finalize the divorce. But this is still her home too. It will be miserable if we all have to live with her. I was wrong about my wife and you were all right. I was wrong about all our years together, all the memories, the life-changing moments. I was convinced that she would get down on her knees and beg for forgiveness. I was so sure that she would regret everything from the last few years and tell the truth to assuage her guilt. This woman literally went back to a farmer's market once when she realized that she had received a few cents more in change. But it seems that we are worth nothing to her. I feel like I'm worthless. Maybe I never was. What I did today was incredibly uncomfortable at home. Despite our efforts to carry on as we have for the last 2 weeks, it's clear that maintaining the status quo is no longer possible. I just wish I could fast forward through it all. Skip the divorce, the conversations, the inevitable arguments and fights, and the drama. I'm thinking especially of those who have had to cohabit with an unfaithful spouse, and I'm looking forward to getting through those difficult times. How will I manage this, especially with the children? I know this is just the beginning. I keep reading all the information and research that promises improvement, but I'm a long way from it. There isn't a single moment when I don't want to scream. Right now, I'm trying to keep a stable mind for the girls, but I don't know if I can hold out for another 3 months. School will start well before all this is over too. I guess this is my life now. I've been trying to pretend as best I can for my daughters. I try to say the right things, think the right things on a daily basis. Comes in waves, but I was hit by a big wave tonight. I lost my composure a bit. The divorce papers have been filed, but my unfaithful wife hasn't hired a lawyer yet. I've been trying to approach the situation patiently and delicately, hoping for the possibility of an amicable divorce that we can resolve mostly on our own. However, after tonight, I'm sure our cohabitation. During the week, my unfaithful wife goes to her sister's house on Friday nights and comes home on Sunday night, since she works very close to our house. But her sister's house is an hour away with no traffic. Over the last few weeks, I've mainly avoided her, while the girls and I have tried to carry on as normal. My unfaithful wife kind of keeps to herself, although there are casual interactions every evening. Except for my eldest daughter and my unfaithful wife, who aren't speaking to each other after a few big arguments. That's the best for now. Lately, I've been following a lot of the advice and lessons I've come across. I work hard on my self-discipline around my wife. Although it takes all my willpower, I've been brief and nonchalant with her when we speak briefly, always polite and respectful. Until tonight. For the last few Fridays, she'd come home from work, pick up a few things and go to her sister's for the weekend, before I'd even got home from work. But not tonight. She was waiting in the kitchen when I got home. I tried to just walk past her, but she lightly held my hand and asked if that was how I was going to treat her, just because she wasn't ready to talk about her case. In fact, it's the first time she's mentioned a word about the betrayal since it all blew up almost a month ago. I made a real effort to contain myself and simply forget about it. However, our daughters weren't home at the time, and an overwhelming sense of anger began to grow inside me. Eventually, I couldn't contain it any longer and I released all the pain, suffering, hurt, anger, and misery that I feel every day. Everything that has been tormenting me. I could give a 4,000-word speech if I tried to recount everything I said. Once I started, I wouldn't stop. Of course, I cried and got very emotional. I was very angry with myself afterwards. I was doing so well. Damn. She caught me. I let her get to me. I knew it. I knew it would happen. It had been building up for a while, and there's a limit to how much I can get off my chest in the gym too. For the first time, my unfaithful wife really broke down and got emotional. Surprisingly, she started crying uncontrollably. Sadly, seeing her suffer in the same way as me made me feel something strange. I wish I didn't care, but there was a certain satisfaction in seeing her finally crumble, as if there really was someone there with an ounce of compassion. She mumbled apologies repeatedly during my emotional outburst. Her tears were quite evident, and all she managed to say was, "I'm sorry." However, I left the kitchen before she could pull herself together enough to say anything more. I asked her to please leave me alone. That's how it happened. She stayed in the kitchen for a while before going to her sister's house. The girls arrived home about half an hour later and knew that something had happened. It was hard to hide, but I wasn't ready to talk about it. I don't think they need to know about it. The younger two are doing very well, and I don't want to hinder their progress. Telling my eldest daughter about it would only add fuel to the fire, which I don't want either. I hate that. I should have stood my ground. I should have just shrugged at my wife and walked past her. I don't know. Now I think about it, it seems like she was just trying to start a conversation about the affair, but didn't know how, and obviously didn't get very far because I exploded. I found myself genuinely concerned for her well-being. I understand that some may criticize me for this, but I don't want any harm to come to her. She's been isolated, left alone with her thoughts, and almost all of them have turned against her. While it's true that she deserves the consequences of her actions, she's still a human being and the mother of my daughters, which backfires for me. I'm really disappointed in myself. Sorry for another long rant. I called my brother and vented to him too. Man, I'm gonna try to start again on Monday. I'm only human. Actually, it was nice to vent my anger at her, but now the regret is getting to me. I'm in a real mess. We've all started therapy. Thank you for listening. Thank you for offering me the support I need to get through all this. And thank you for all the advice. In the midst of the chaos, Update 6. I know many of you worried about me, and I appreciate your concern. Many of you were right. Things are not going well. I haven't had a chance to be online for a while. Initially, I thought I'd take a break from the internet, but this week has destabilized me terribly. My wife hasn't given me any space all week. She's been overly kind, constantly apologizing for the affair, crying and sometimes overwhelming me with attempts at physical closeness. She's been knocking on my door at night wanting to talk. I ignored her a few times, but spoke up when I felt like it. Finally, I snapped at her on Wednesday night, telling her to leave me alone. Last night it happened. Just over a month since my soon-to-be ex-wife came home after her affair exploded. Now, as things have got into that uncomfortable routine of cohabitation, she came into my room after the girls had gone to bed and asked to talk to me in private. It was different from how she'd been approaching me all week. We thought we'd start a conversation in the garage and sat in my car to avoid confrontation in front of the children again. Between long apologies, she told me everything, according to her. We stayed outside for almost 3 hours. I don't know how much sharing. I stayed up all night, listening to her cry for several hours. Sleep eluded me, and I found myself in a cycle of tears and anger. At times, I struggled to resist the urge to go inside and express my anger, only to be overwhelmed by tears again. The emotional turmoil continued in waves. Please forgive me if it takes me a day or so to reply to anyone. I just need to vent and try to get some sleep. It hasn't helped having my wife constantly apologizing and begging for another chance all night. Tonight, I also had to go out for a few hours just to get away from her. It's just too painful to be around her. Anyway, that was it. She told me that she was introduced to her lover by her sister about 6 years ago, well before the pandemic. Apparently, there was no romantic intent initially, but he was a superior in a company where she wanted to work. He gave her hope of opportunities and mentioned vacancies. So her desire to change jobs was not motivated by the affair. But once the offer became serious and she changed jobs, She obviously had an additional incentive. As soon as she got the job, her lover started flirting with her. It started with messages, then photos, and the messages evolved into something physical shortly before the pandemic. She confessed to her sister at the time, but decided to bury it and not tell me. Of course, my wife said she cut off contact with her lover soon after, but when the quarantines and restrictions were lifted, he started communicating with her again and the affair resumed. She claims that she ended the affair several times out of guilt, but always came back to him in the end. Essentially, the affair never really ended. She detailed everything in a 5-page bundle of handwritten notes, outlining the timeline of the affair. She read the entire account and answered questions along the way. It was revealed that she had lied about weekend trips with friends, business trips, traffic jams, problems with her parents, shopping trips, among other things. I suspected as much, and the list was long. I trusted her every word without question. But it was all just a front to be with him. Hearing all this only made me feel worse. Everyone was right about that. However, her affection for me never really diminished. While all this was going on, she never became distant, although the intimacy changed, not enough for me to notice red flags. She admits to falling in love with her lover and wanting a life with him. He was older, divorced and single, promising luxuries, vacations, and everything he could offer. She began to fantasize about escaping family responsibilities, describing the thrill of being with him as irresistible. She spoke openly about how she had deluded herself with the routine of family life. Her account was remarkably sincere, emotional, and seemed to be honest. Halfway through, I lost my composure and started to cry. Listening to it all was painful, as you'd expect. Of course, once she'd finished her confession, she told me how much she loved me, had always loved me, and that she was willing to do anything. I did everything to try to save our marriage, as many of you saw would happen. But it all seems so fake to me, as if it were rehearsed. I've been with this woman for more than half my life, and I believe I can sense when she's full of lies. Maybe I'm wrong, but I controlled myself better than last week, although I was still overcome with anger and said some not-so-nice things. I even teased her about how her lover was involved with several women, and she was just one of many he was willing to discard. This clearly hurt her deeply. Millions of thoughts ran through my head, imagining the moment when she would finally confess. I thought of puns and words that could hurt her as much as she had hurt me emotionally that night. One thing I knew she would ask was, if her lover was still alive and she had to choose between him and me, who would she choose? She hesitated, then muttered that it wasn't fair. I pressed her, and she finally admitted that she would choose me. I pointed out that her hesitation was already sufficient grounds for divorce, showing that she was lying. This made her start crying, and we sat in silence in the car, her sobs echoing. I was exhausted and finally told her that we were getting divorced. I emphasized our responsibility to our daughters, asking us to face this in a civilized way, being excellent parents and remaining present in their lives. I added that, after all the pain she had caused me, I hoped she would be able to get a fair and amicable divorce, as proof that she really loved me. The last thing I said to her was something I read on the internet. Please understand that I'm not a mean person, and I didn't mean to cause you pain on purpose. It seemed a fitting closure to everything, but every word was genuine. I leaned over and kissed her on the forehead, saying that I would have loved her forever, but that I wished I never had to see her again. Then I got out of the car and went to bed. Of course, I couldn't sleep last night, and here I am again, unable to find peace in sleep. Tonight, I'm lost. I don't know what's going to happen now. Her opportunity to test the divorce has come and gone. I think it might be a good thing, but I haven't spoken to my lawyer yet. I find myself crying again, sinking back into those phases of depression and anger. It was devastating to hear everything last night, to discover the truth. I recognized the possibility that she could have made it all up for some unknown reason. However, that lines up perfectly with everything I've put together over the last month. For now, this saga continues. I have a few good days, regain a sense of strength, but then another twist comes along. It feels like months and a few days have passed simultaneously. I try to sleep. Imagine the person you love, the only woman you've ever loved and kissed, telling you that she cheated on you for over 4 years because she was bored. She didn't stop loving you. She didn't move away. There were no problems in the relationship or lack of intimacy. None of that. She was just bored. I don't know if that makes it worse or better. Thank you for reading and for all your support along the way. I promise to make an effort to reply in the morning, after I've had a chance to sleep. She did. She's gone. She decided to commit the final, unforgivable act. I can't say how, but the children saw nothing. Many of you have contacted me in recent weeks, offering support to a stranger like me. I thank you all and apologize for not responding. I've been trying to stay away from social media. I've received a flood of positive messages, but now there's just silence. The house is extremely quiet. The reality of the last few months of my life has finally set in. I feel like I'm in the eye of a hurricane, longing for the storm to end. I recognize that this is a fictitious metaphor, but it reflects my current reality. There is a profound absence of joy and hope, leaving an empty crater where my soul used to be happy. Despite the immense struggle, I've been trying to maintain a strong facade for my daughters since I discovered my wife's affair. After torturous weeks of living together and heart-to-heart talks, now that she's gone, I've found that I can no longer pretend to be strong. I can barely get out of bed in the morning, but I know I have to carry on for the sake of my daughters. So I carry on, replaying our last conversation like a horror movie in my head, regretting every word, wishing I could go back and say something different. Anything. The last thing I said to her was that I loved her and always would, but that I wished I never saw her again. I was hurt and vulnerable just trying to be honest. I'm exhausted by the same conversations, her desperation and her apologies. I'm tired. Now, life seems to have catered to my desire for a terrible joke. Considering that my daughters will be without their mother for the rest of their lives, they're fine, I suppose. My eldest daughter continues to look after me, forcing me to eat and watching movies with me at weekends. I'm very grateful for her. The other two girls have resumed life as normal with school and sports, which makes me happy. I find immense support from my mother and brother, but every day is still filled with negativity. Therapy has become a routine for all of us, and although my daughters seem to benefit, it's hard for me to give myself over completely. There's a weight of guilt and sadness that I can't shake off. I attend sessions mainly because my eldest daughter insists. As a Christian, I turn to the book that has helped me so much, trying to maintain strength and faith despite the challenges and tribulations. But I'll admit I'm failing at this. I just want to shout, "It's not fair!" 1,000 times at the top of my lungs. I thought I was a good husband and father. I thought I had done right by people, that I was a moral man. But I've suddenly been hit by this horrible hand and I can't get out of my pit of despair. I feel weak, pathetic, sorry for myself and horribly empty inside. Life isn't fair. Life is hard, and I understand. I'm just not sure I have the strength to face this storm. What do you all do when you're at your lowest? That brings us to the end of this story. The author is a great father and man, and he didn't deserve what his wife did to him. He faced the consequences of her betrayal and estrangement with grace. He did what he could. But the betrayal and her affair were too much to forgive. No one in their right mind would blame him for the divorce or the way he treated her. I hope he doesn't blame himself for her death. He's not responsible for that outcome. It was she who made the decision to end it all. It's very sad, but the author and his daughters are the wounded and betrayed victims here. I hope he and his daughters can get over it. What do you think of this story? What would be your advice to the author? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, show your support for the channel by leaving a like and a comment. Many thanks to all the members for watching so far. See you next time.